Pop quiz, first thing. What year do you think I began teaching college writing classes just like this one? Go ahead, think of a year. Did you guess 1999? If you did, you're correct. That's right. My teaching expertise spans 2 centuries. Can you believe it? Now, I was very green. I was very new to teaching when I stepped in front of my very first classroom, and I wasn't much older than the students that I taught. I had only graduated college 2.5 months before I taught my first college class. So I had to do a lot of learning on the go. And what I learned early on about myself is that I love changing stuff up. I don't believe in being stagnant as an instructor, as a professor. I'm always on to the next thing. I do that with music. I do that with even like things like parenting strategies and running technology. I try new shoes all the time. So that's just a part of who I am, is trying new things and seeing what works. Always in the belief that we're getting better, that someone out there is doing it better than I am, and I need to learn from that person, and learn is a fancy way of saying steal from that person. So I go to lots of conferences. I try to stay up to date in my field. So one semester hardly looks like the semester before it, hardly looks like the semester before that. Always changing things up. And I tell you this to say there's one thing that I really haven't changed that is a fundamental core value of my pedagogy, my teaching strategies, something that I've believed in my entire teaching career, and if these patterns hold, will be something that informs my teaching strategies for the rest of my years to come, years and years. So what is that thing, that one activity, that one precept? It's peer review. And so I'm devoting an entire screencast to what it means to be a peer reviewer and how to go about doing that peer review, not only sort of from an attitudinal perspective, like the sort of the headspace or the mindset I want you to occupy, but also, of course, the nuts and bolts, the things you have to do in order to complete this peer review assignment, which is a graded one. So if we were in a face-to-face class, I would say, let's have a look around. Go ahead, look at everybody else in here. And I would make you all make awkward eye contact with each other. Many college classes are full of strangers to one another, especially the bigger the campus, the more likely you're going to be taking, especially gen ed classes like college composition, with people that maybe you don't live near, people that you've not met before. And so I have my students look around and see each other not only as fellow students, but also as peers, as people on the level. Now, you're at a special age where I can talk about this even more frankly than usual, but at the end of the day, I understand, I know that I'm the person who's putting grades next to your names in Blackboard. I'm the person whose authority, as much as I can subvert it and try to, be that cool guy who's like, oh, I'm more like you than you think. At the end of the day, I know I am your professor and you are my students, and I know that that fundamentally defines our relationship, how you contact me, how we interact, and when there is an authoritative figure in a dynamic, in a relationship, there is always going to be the capacity, and especially I think the younger you get, the desire to tune out those authoritative people. Think about, you do listen to every single word your parents say. Judging by what I'm learning about some of you, I bet that's true. I bet you do. But do you listen to everything your teachers say? Probably not. And I don't begrudge you that at all. I understand that dynamic, and I'm happy to, instead of trying to change it and radically, fundamentally alter how teachers and students interact, which is, I don't think, something I can do or any single person can do. I would rather maximize the potential that you have as peers, right? So if I'm sort of the parent of the class, if I occupy this sort of higher authoritative level, well, then everyone else who occupies a similar level to you is your peer, right? And so sometimes there's things you can tell your siblings or your classmates that you just can't tell, people sort of up the food chain, so to speak. And so peer review is an absolutely awesome opportunity to not only get but give feedback in a way that is just, it's realer in some ways, and it's more authentic in some ways than I can ever do. I try my best to respond to your writing, not only as your professor, but also as someone who's reading your writing, and I really do believe that that's an important part of my job. But there are many, many students who end up learning more through peer review than I can ever teach them, and I absolutely love that. And so, for as long as as long as I got teeth in my head, as long as I'm teaching classes like this, I'm going to be assigning and expecting quality peer review. So that's enough of me front and center. I think we can all agree. Let me drag this a little bit over here so it's not totally weird. Where's my hair going? All right. So peer review guidelines. Well, maybe we'll talk nuts and bolts first. So in our week 3 agenda, which I obviously have a lot of things to fill in, is going to be the link to this SA2 peer review spreadsheet. Okay, so you'll put your name here, you'll put your email here, you'll put your link to your SA2 rough draft here. I'll have a little more to say about sharing and proper sharing, but basically, let me say it right now. Let me go right back to big screen. If the person who you've been assigned to peer review, and I'll explain what that means in a second, but if they're not doing their job, if you can't get access to the person who you've been assigned to peer review, they get 24 hours. So send the request. Please make a note of the time with your watch, with your phone, of course, with the clock on the wall, whatever. Make a note of when you made that request, and that person is on the clock 24 hours. And if you don't hear back from that person in that amount of time, you don't have to peer review their work anymore. Go peer review someone else's work who's done their job, who's been, who's done right by this class. Okay, so hopefully we won't have too many snafus with that, but I bet we have a couple. So your name. So let's just say if I'm doing it, let's see. So Steve, email address. And again, I'm pointing to the screen like you can see that. No high school email addresses. You guys pretty much got that figured out, which is awesome. So yeah, maybe I'll just type in my email. And then let's say, do I have a link? Okay, there you go. I must have a link on my clipboard. So I'll link to SA2, to your rough draft. So watch the week 3 email on how to kind of compose the rough draft. So then let's say, I'll use my wife's name. So let's say Melissa posts beneath me. Okay, and then her email, let's make hers state, whatever. That's not her email, but that's fine. And then she posts the link under there. Now, Melissa is posted second, which means she will read the essay posted above hers. So Melissa gets to read Steve's. Now, Steve, since he is the first one to post, Steve will also wait for, he doesn't, I don't want Steve, the first person to post, to wait down here to, student 152 or however many of you there are. Absolutely daunting number if you ask me. So whoever posts second gets to get their work peer reviewed twice, because once the third person comes in, let's give this one my daughter's name. I can type it correctly. Okay, let's make hers EHL, spec state. Okay, now Estelle will peer review Melissa's. All right, understanding me here, I hope this makes sense. Your supporting teachers generally have this figured out. Having a really fun time imagining my 4-year-old having an email address and the havoc he would wreak with it. I love my little guy so much. He is a tornado in human form. All right, so Keller would read Estelle's. Estelle would read Melissa's. Melissa would read Steve's. Steve would read Melissa, and on and on. So as soon as you post your rough draft, you are able to complete the peer review instead of waiting around for me to create teams or whatever. So now sometimes we'll talk. I think maybe I'll talk about this a little bit in the week 3 screencast as well. But there are going to be a lot of you. There's a drop dead time for this to happen. You can post your rough draft as soon as it is ready. As soon as it's ready, I would post it. And it doesn't have to be all that much writing, just enough for people to respond to, for your peers to respond to. So some of you are going to wait and wait and wait and wait, just because that's the nature of students. I've learned over my 2 centuries of experience that once there's a sort of a scrum at the bottom of the list, as I say, multiple people posting all at the same time, sometimes drafts get lost. Sometimes people type over other people's names and don't even know they're doing it. Some people type over other people's names and they know they're doing it. All sorts of bad stuff can kind of come down the pike as a result. So my strong advice, as always and with everything, is to get your work done early. Okay. So I hope that makes sense. Send me any, email me with any questions or concerns about how that all goes. Okay, so phase 2 here, you want to take a little break, go right ahead. But the guidelines themselves. So once you read a rough draft, I want you to respond to it as you would a reader, okay? As someone who's, and the other thing I like about peer review is this, is that you're all navigating my expectations, you're all trying to interpret the assignment in ways that will be conducive to good grades, et cetera, et cetera. So you're all uniquely suited to help each other. You have what's called student capacity. It's a pretty hot button word, buzzword in my field right now, is the idea of student capacity. Where are your capabilities maximized? And for my money's worth, I think it's in peer review. So what you have to do is you're going to respond to the things you're seeing in the essay. Now, this is our very first crack at peer review, so I'll be looking for you to honor sort of the spirit of the assignment, but the down to the letter of it will be pretty easy going. But you have to make at least 6 marginal comments on the rough draft. Okay, only 2, and I would rather it be 0 to be honest. But I don't want you fixing little word choice things. I don't want you saying, "Oh, is that supposed to be a comma?" I don't need that little stuff. I will fix that stuff. The writer is sort of on the hook for their own grammar. I want you focusing on what are called like macro issues or zoomed out, global concerns. Most writing, when you encounter writing, you're either dealing with, the big things, the macro issues, global things that affect the entire earth, so to speak, the entire essay. What we don't need to focus on too much are like local concerns, super specialized things that only affect like a sentence or a phrase. There's other phrases for this: high order concerns and last order concerns. There's lots of I could drop all sorts of buzzwords on you, but I want you looking at big picture things. Okay, how clearly are the writer's ideas being communicated? That sort of thing. Okay, now the writer's going to ask some questions, at least 3. So I want you to answer at least 2. And if your writer is lazy and doesn't ask questions, then I guess just disregard this, but also I guess think a little less of that person because they're not following instructions. Okay, substantive issues related to writing. Okay, so how effective is the intro? How clear and focused? If there's a thesis statement, how's it look? Paragraph organization and development. Okay, transitions, moving from one idea to the next. Level of detail. Okay, so if someone's writing a really short essay, usually one of the bigger questions you want to ask is what's missing. So I'm already kind of stealing from down here. Quality of sources. Okay, these are concerns for later on. Quote integration or citation style, and then how effective is the conclusion. So there are plenty of outside grammar resources. If you know of other ones, please let me know. These are my kind of 3 favorites, my 3 crutches that I lean on the most: the Purdue OWL, Grammar Girl, and Chomp Chomp. So I'd love if you would link. If you see like rampant comma splices, like why not put a link to comma splice help in there? That's when, just to be clear, like sometimes if there's if a grammar mistake happens over and over, then that takes a local issue and it multiplies it to the extent that it becomes a global issue or a higher order concern. Okay, and then at the end of the draft, and I could always get questions on this in the semester, I don't care where it appears. You can make it in the essay itself, you can make it a nice long comment, you can put it in an email that you copy me on. I really don't care with this last 150 word note. I don't care the form that it takes. Okay, so just make sure it exists. Overall impressions, suggestions for improving. Always this question: what is missing? What do you want to learn more about? Rough drafts are almost always about fleshing out ideas, developing more detail, explaining yourself a bit more. And then attitudes. So I want you to be honest and I want you to be productive. If you're going to say that something doesn't sound great, I want you to explain why it doesn't sound as great to you as a reader. Okay, so I generally have pretty civil students, but I'm going to repeat this here in a minute, but I want you to bring me into the peer review process if there's anything at all I need to know. That is to say, if someone's not doing their job, if someone's being insulting or unnecessarily harsh, I want to know that stuff. I need to put that person on a list. Okay, so please let me know if that's happening at all. But you also have to be productive. If you skate over too many paragraphs that aren't really adding up to much, well, then you're not really doing the writer any favors either. Okay, so don't resolve any comments as the writer. I want to see these comments. It's how I grade peer review. So do not resolve them. And if you do, I guess your name's going on the list too, now that I'm making that very strange, very vague threat. Then for your final draft, you make a copy of your rough draft. I want to grade something clean. I don't want any comments on it. When it's my turn to sit down and grade it, I want it clean. Okay, now I save the important stuff for the very end because if I have issues that are related to this policy, I'll know you haven't watched this screencast. So yeah, I'm evil like that. Your peer review partner has 24 hours to respond to a sharing request, and if 24 hours passes, go ahead and peer review a rough draft of your choice off of the spreadsheet. So just pick any old rough draft that you want, okay? And peer review that one. Even if someone else has already looked at it, there's plenty of room for other people's opinions. We could do peer review like 4 people, like you read 3 and 3 read yours. But I like the one-on-one nature of it. That seems to produce the best writing. But it does depend on every individual holding their own. So we'll see if that happens. I want to know about any drama. And at the end of the day, I want the feedback to be valuable, but it is your essay. I want you to have ownership over your ideas. So you don't have to do the things that your peer reviewer is asking you to do, although they tend to be pretty solid advice, at least from another person's perspective. So 5 seconds to go. Steve, you've done it once again. Send me your questions. Good luck.